Attention please, we are on schedule absolutely. I would request Dr. Abinash Mohanty to give a presentation, India's role to combat climate change, a narrative on various traditional knowledge and practices of India to combat change. He is the Project Director, Center for Environment, Energy and Climate Change at ISAS-ADRI in Patna.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Professor Mitra, for hosting us out here. Thank you all the guests out here and to my fellow presenters. Of late, like Dr. Amit Ranjan started off with his presentation, that climate change is always taken and considered in terms of its conclusions. So, conclusion always comes up with some actions, and actions need to be retrospective. That's why in an era of technological innovations, and standing at Singapore, which leads and pioneers the fact that technical innovations are part of life, we need to retrospect our technical innovations. And if we want to deal with a subject like climate change, then probably technical innovations need a retrospection in terms of linking it to the community indigenous knowledge and practices. So that's why I thought, like in India, we have a rich cultural heritage background where we work a lot and take the discussion forward. But climate change needs to be discussed in that regard. Before coming to the fact that climate change is what and how conclusions, I don't need to describe climate change here. So Asia is home to 40% of the climate change-induced disasters. 84% of the people are affected due to disasters. The IPCC 6th assessment report states that climate change in the South Asian perspective is one of the highest. Drought, floods, and severe extreme events need to be retrospective. The IPCC 2016 report says that from flooding, food shortages, and stagnation of the economic growth are just some of the devastating impacts of South Asia we experienced due to advancing climate change. South Asia's vulnerability to these disasters are profound, and changes in the intensity of rainfall events have made. And now climate change has made some humanitarian point of discretion. We talk of climate refugees, we talk of people who have been displaced. This particular slide of mine will give you a retrospection of how South Asia, or in that perspective, how Asia is suffering with all these latest disasters. We talk of any disaster, and those disasters are somewhere in any part of Asia. Starting from Afghanistan to India, to Cambodia, to Myanmar, or to Indonesia, or to China, disasters always happen there, and people have always been affected. When we talk of different kinds of disasters have been the result of the so-called conclusions of climate change impacts. And South Asia is 84% more vulnerable. But climate change and disasters have a different angle, the humanitarian angle. And because of climate change, we have a lot of people who have been displaced in short. And this displacement is basically can be figured out as per IDMC's latest report, which says that 32.4 million people are displaced. And to the surprise, China is one of the major contributors to the displacement where people have displaced. And at the same time, China and India are leading in this forefront as well. Now the question of climate change and its adaptation and mitigation has been a point of discussion not only at regional level, not only at governance level, but at international relations level. Now the last presentation by Dr. Amit was based on the transboundary issues related to water. So when we talk of those, we need to find out probably there is a gap, and that gap may be addressed because maybe needs an introspection, because we have never considered in our policy making or implementation the bottom of the pyramid, people who are actually affected. So that's why I'm here to make a presentation on the indigenous trade and practices, how communities by far, to a greater extent in the eastern part of India, have been combating climate change as well as adapting to it at a greater rate. Again, referring to Dr. Amitendu's presentation, siltation is one of the major problems, but siltation has got an answer, and this is one of the practices which is practiced in East Champaran. Though, have you ever heard of planting some trees or agricultural innovations in terms of sands or deserts? This particular community, due to flood-prone area and its implementation that every year flood comes and goes to them, their agricultural lands and farms have been affected. But what they do is, they have adapted to this indigenous practice and knowledge, which has not been imbibed within them from a near future. Like their generations have been doing it. Basically, what they do is, with after the floods, there are a lot of silts that come in and go. So what they do is they dig, because this sand is always moist in that part of the country. And what they do is they dig around 10 feet, and after digging, they give a compost to it, where they germinate the seeds that are available. And this seeds and germination, again, after the germination phase, goes around for a greater climatic resilient agriculture that they say. And the result, what they get is this. They have a huge amount of watermelon production, they have huge amount of lintels which are produced, which are not only climate resilient, but also that the flood doesn't affect their economic viability. This looks like a medicine, but actually it's not a medicine. We talk of water contamination. Water is somewhere available, but water contamination has been one of the major problems, and availability of fresh water is actually a big challenge. And in order to combat that, this is one of the indigenous tribal community, which is called as Tarak community, and they reside in the borders of West Bengal and Odisha. And these communities, what they have done is, they have their own indigenous way, right from 13th century, how they understand that iron contamination in water can be taken out. These are guava leaves. Once they are crushed and put into the water, if the water gives you a color of something like violet, then it's iron contaminated. And if it doesn't, then it's completely clean. Now that if it is iron contaminated, how do we resolve the problem? The indigenous communities or the communities at large have a solution to it. And they have done it in very interesting. This looks like a matka, we call it in Hindi. So this looks like a earthen pot which is designed indigenously. But to our surprise, this is a 13th century design which has got 2 into 10 nanometer pore size. Now we talk of nanotechnology now, where nanotechnology is leading in terms of all the effects, all the technological innovations. But this is something which indigenous community of the tribal community have designed in 13th century. Now this interesting earthen pot cost them something around $3, $3 US to be precise. And what they do is, they put the water for 24 hours, and once the water is placed, the iron contaminated water is placed over this pot. After 24 hours, there is a precipitation, and because of precipitation, the slag leaves behind and the filtered water goes up. So they can use this filtered water. And look how interesting is this solution to the problem. Of course, elephants. When in India we talk of wild animals, it's always the human-wildlife conflict. But climate change has not only brought devastations, but also has done something. And what it has done is, it has brought the relationship between animals and birds to a cohesive one. And what they have done is, there are communities way far behind who have used animals, birds as some portion of them have been used basically as messengers. These animals, these birds, in fact these are pigeons, and these pigeons have been the messengers of disaster in many parts of Odisha, basically the southern Odisha, which is always affected by cyclone in almost in every year. And these pigeons have interestingly carried on information and can sense the amount of information for a way behind 10 hours, which gives them a scope of rehabilitation. This chart is something interesting which talks of a pan-India irrigation practice, because on pan-India only eastern part of India doesn't have its indigenous traditional irrigation practices, rather every part of India has it. And to the surprise, one of the best irrigation practices are from Bihar. When the farming or the agricultural irrigation practices are taken into account, Ahar pines is one of the interesting ones. And Ahar pine system of irrigation is well acknowledged system of irrigation which in the verge of dying, but still it has answers to many questions where irrigation is water-starved. So now the argument for the presentation is that somewhere in the policy planning and implementation, we need to design a framework where the indigenous communities and their voices are to be put in, their practices are to be put in. If a policy is not successful, probably we say that people are not adapted or that much exposed to it, but do we take their accountability or their voice into policy making? If we have a system where their indigenous practices and knowledges are put into policy and made stride into a regional perspective rather than looking at a pan-Asia perspective of combating climate change or pan-India or pan-Singapore perspective, let's look at pan-Champaran, pan-Bihar or pan-Odisha for that per se. In that perspective, many of the geographical landscapes have got similarities. Now, the landscape of East Champaran matches to that of the landscape in the western Afghanistan. So, the practices that are taken up, if there can be a model of exchange and these are placed into the policy making, then probably this will give a stand in order to combat climate change, because we will be involving their knowledge, their practices, as well as we will be having a greater participation into the policy making process so they can get into it. To provide a valuable insight of how communities have been projecting, the local communities should be seen as equal partners in combating climate change. The inclusion will create a cohesive participation among the stakeholders, and this will be making possible elements at risk with vulnerability. But the local communities, when we talk of, there is always a question that local communities have got a perspective not related to climate change. That's what we listen very often. But climate change is something, if we need to understand the language of climate change from their perspective. For them, their decrease in the agricultural production is actually climate change. Their floods, people affecting floods or cyclone or storms are languages of climate change. We need to tell them that climate change is not a jargon, rather these are the daily activities that they go through, and they need to understand it. Probably they have their own solutions. We need to shape it and put it into perspective. So the choice is ours. How do we take it as researchers or as academicians? We need to understand that probably a lot of questions answer lies in our culture, tradition, as well as the community's adaptation to it. And this is what, if we are looking at it, then probably we need to retrospect our thinking process from bottom to top approach rather than top to bottom approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Abinash. I would like to mention only one point. I'm not in a position to comment. We will participate in the question and answer session. When you mentioned about India's load, I would like to mention there is a weather load in the context of Bihar as well. In fact, in the Hindi article, that is called Ghag ka Duha. Possibly Dr. Mitra will be knowing. Kahe Ghag. And many of the things that he used to say, those things is to be bank correct. Now because of the climate change, the Ghag Dua have become irrelevant. So we need to construct a new climatic zone, climatic load, keeping Ghag in our backdrop so that people can understand. So that is some sort of a climatic literacy which was being propagated several centuries ago. So we need to recreate those things. Possibly your center can take it up on this front. Thank you so much. Now I would like to request Dr. Amitendu Palit. He is a senior research fellow and he needs no introduction in Singapore. And he will be speaking on economic potential of Eastern India, the emerging sectors.
Thank you very much, Professor Gupta, and thank you very much to you again, as well as Professor Mitra and all the colleagues here. I think this is a rare occasion when we actually get to look at the eastern part of India very specifically, because eastern part of India is accustomed to stepmotherly perceptions, not patronizing perceptions. So, as somebody from the region, I think the truth lies somewhere in between. I mean, there has been stepmotherly treatment, true, but like in the positions that India take on global climate change issues, it's not always sufficient to say that we will not act since the others have committed higher sins. There is a responsibility that India and China also have to bear, and they just can't get away by being the largest carbon emitters. So East India, to that respect, also probably has a greater responsibility to fulfill, and I think it needs to be conscious about the fact that it's capable of playing a much bigger and larger role in not only the Indian economy, but in India as a whole, in a multitude of aspects. I'll stay confined to the economic perspective over here. And let me begin with the general context that today it's 2017, 25, 26 years after India moved to a completely different way of organizing its economy, following the economic liberalization policies in 1991. But several things haven't changed over these 26 years. And one of the things which hasn't changed is that India continues to remain a potential when it comes to economy. I mean, there are tons of literature which describe the potential of India, but there is no literature which conclusively says that India has arrived as a major economy of the world, except statistically. And this statistics, purely in terms of the size of the Indian economy, is not good enough to provide empirical evidence to the fact that it has arrived, because there's a lot more that's involved insofar as economic and social performance is concerned, where India is lacking. So the objective remains for India to achieve high growth rates. And the normal conventional notion is that in order to make that happen, manufacturing must revive in India. Now the problem over here is, what is the benchmark that one takes for reviving manufacturing? Probably manufacturing, in that sense, hadn't really at all historically ever reached a stage vis-a-vis which one can talk about revival. When we look at 1990s, the reason why we attribute manufacturing to have a fairly large share in GDP was because India at that time had a largely non-existent services economy. The modern services were not really there, which flourished later. And from that time onward till today, we observe this very strange thing that the share of manufacturing in the last 26 years has actually gone down in GDP, from 18% to 16%. Now this is a striking fact. It's a striking fact because it hasn't happened in advanced economies if one goes by the typical Rostovian phase of development, where agriculture shifts to manufacturing and then to services. It hasn't happened in advanced economies, it didn't happen in Asia, it didn't even happen in China. But somehow India seems to have set off a trend where the contribution of manufacturing to the national economy looks to be plateauing off much earlier than they have happened with other economies. So probably the time has come for us to consider whether, when we look at India's economic growth prospects in future, whether we can continue to afford giving as much importance to manufacturing and its prospects as we have always done. Can manufacturing really deliver us the goods? And this is extremely important for a region like Eastern India, because Eastern India was the hub of heavy industrialization in India, always. And it's just not because of the state-owned enterprises that were built during the colonial empires, not because that the Tatas first began in East India, but also because of the fact that Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, and the greater Eastern India actually provided a model for industrial development, which in the 50s and subsequently later in the 60s also inspired several heavy industrialization strategies in India, much of which was reflected in the Mahalanobis strategy and subsequently later in terms of the capital-intensive production. We today encounter a situation from where East India is typically said to be in a state of languish. Industries have closed, and no better state than mine, that of Bengal, to illustrate this as one travels down the river Hooghly. What one sees on both sides are just the closed mills, one after another, along the Hooghly, typically the jute mills and heavy industrial mills, which have all shut. Jobs have gone, jobs haven't come up, new jobs haven't been generated. It's led to an extensive migration, and migration from Eastern India and Bengal hasn't been confined to unskilled migration. It's also led to heavy skilled migration. Heavy skilled migration to the extent that even from the best of universities in the region, from Jadavpur University, from the B College, Engineering College of Shibpur University, from Patna University, from Utkal University, the best and the brightest have just moved on without thinking twice as to whether they can stay on. So the transaction costs have been high, but the opportunity cost foregone has been even much higher, forcing them to make the choices. That has always not been the case in other parts of India. Now compare this eastern scenario of frustration and depression economically with another east coast of the world, and I'm referring to the Chinese east coast. More than 70% of China's economy comes from its east coast. How did this happen? The answer is very simple. There was an unbalanced growth strategy which Deng Xiaoping followed. Deng Xiaoping spotted that the only way China can break out of its low-income trap is to focus on the coast and get all the resources onto the coast, concentrate them there, and for a period of 15 years, he kept on pushing these industries till China by 1996 came to occupy 45% of the global manufacturing. There was a price that was paid for this, but we will come to that later. But it was in 1997 that China went back to its look west strategy of developing the internet. But by that time, it had succeeded in lifting 30% of its population out of poverty, simply by building the industries on the east coast, building the infrastructure that connected the ports with the internet, and getting cheap labor-intensive exports to work on the coast. Unfortunately, in India, the east was never prioritized. It was acted against. The freight equalization policy actually acted against the east all through the decades, but it was never prioritized. Whereas the east should have been the most natural choice for India's industrialization after 1991 because of what the East had in its east. The east to the east in India is the world's most vibrant economic region, and that's the Asia Pacific. It was a natural conduit. If this role had been played well, then there is no reason why the east wouldn't have flourished. And today we talk about, after 16 years, we talk about global production networks, we talk about regional supply chains, we talk about intra-industry trade. Well, these things were spoken of in this part of the world in the 70s and 80s. It is not for nothing that the only city from India that figures on the One Belt, One Road and its maritime part is Kolkata. And that to the Kolkata port. Because of the great strategic importance that Kolkata port has in the entire geographical connectivity of the region. But year after year, decade after decade, Indian port trust and shipping industries have spent their time wondering as to how this river Hooghly, which meanders and cracks and twists and turns, cannot be converted into a major port. The discussion is never focused on how it can be converted into a major port. So you have Haldia coming up upstream. You have the river Hooghly and the Kolkata port back into it. But there's no continuous process of port development going backward into Orissa. And then further downward into Andhra, which today has 914 square kilometers of barren coastline. None of the regimes, no political party has ever focused at any level on this. And I don't know whether this can be attributed to the fact that East or Eastern politicians never really had that much of say in central government policy making. In fact, this is a contestable proposition. I'm not totally convinced about this. But what I'm convinced over the fact is that if the coastline had been acted upon, empirical evidence across the world shows that coasts can deliver great results. And it hasn't happened for Eastern India. It's not that it cannot happen. It can. But for that, I think what is important is for governments to focus on this neglected aspect. Today, there are minor ports which can come up. One doesn't have to go on major ports. One doesn't have to wait for the Indian port trusts and major ports to get corporatized. There is enough of diaspora wealth from East India. There is enough of corporate business attention from Japan, Korea, China, even Singapore to invest in port development. But the response must come domestically. And once that port development kicks in, it is very simple to connect it onto the ongoing domestic connectivity, in so much so that the Bihar-Odisha-Bengal triangle just becomes a flourishing triangle. And I think this is such political short-sightedness that the state, which stands to benefit the maximum as an external beneficiary out of this triangle, is the state of UP. It's the direct beneficiary of this hinterland growth if the triangle comes up, and the northeast. I mean, we talked about the VCIM. I mean, the Chinese do everything with a purpose, and they clearly understand the potential of the VCIM. That's the only way the western part of China can get connected onto the Bay of Bengal, as it comes down through the northeast into the Kolkata port. And who knows Kolkata better than the Chinese? After all, it's the only place in the sun in India which has still a Chinatown. So I think let's look at it this way, that there's no point in talking about sectors, industries, hubs, unless and until what East India has is not recognized and not acted upon. The need for infrastructure is very important all across India, but it's nowhere as important as in Eastern India. And here I allude to the coastal infrastructure. It's extremely important. On the western and southern part of India, there's a jostling of space for minor ports. We don't see that happening in East India at all, except for the bottom southeastern part of India. And over here, let me also now just briefly focus on another aspect. I think it's very important that we must get out of this great fanciful idea that we have about Indian manufacturing, that someday in future it will contribute 25% of India's GDP and account for 100 million jobs. It will never happen. Because the grammar of manufacturing has changed. We are living in the age of Industrial Revolution 4.0. Those jobs which China did, those jobs which Taiwan did, which Korea did, and the way the geese flew is never going to come back. What we can achieve in the course of manufacturing is only in very specific industries, and where those industries will come up and how they will be located will depend very critically about niche conditions. But what can happen is if in a state like Odisha, in Bihar for example, which has a great tradition of learning. In fact, these are three states taken together which probably will produce the greatest historical stock of knowledge and learning in India. I don't think there's no other region which can boast of this. So why can't this region become an education hub? I mean, what's stopping it from becoming an education hub? We have Nalanda, we have Presidency College, we have Ramesh College. What is stopping us from acting together and building this into an education hub? I don't think there is any need for East India to be sold to the rest of the world as an education hub, because the best and brightest of India come from that part of the country. And they're all over the world. So there's no reason why this cannot be put together into a higher education hub strategy, but unfortunately, for that people have to talk to each other. People have to talk to each other, people have to converse, people have to match themselves. I mean, this is probably the only region in India which can easily have 4 liberal arts colleges working together. I mean, if Panipat and Rohtak can have liberal arts colleges under private universities, I don't see why Calcutta, Cuttack, Bhubaneswar, Patna cannot have liberal arts colleges. They would stop. And given the incredibly rich tradition of scholarship and thinking that is there, so I would look at it as one sector which needs to be looked at importantly. And another interesting thought which I have always nurtured in myself. I think there's a commercial side to creativity. And the commercial side to creativity doesn't come from copy. It comes purely because of the fact that people are happy to pay and be a part of high-scale creativity. Today, again, we are talking of 3 states which have the 3 most vibrant entertainment industries in the country. We have Bengal. No need to explain what kind of entertainment industry Bengal has had. Art, culture, movies, music, literature. We have Bihar. Bhojpuri industry has crossed all the barriers of the world. It's captured Bollywood now. And we have Odisha. Again, a striking example in entertainment industry. So why can't there be at least 5 more schools like the Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute across the rest of the region? I mean, why can't this turn out to be an industry? Why can't there be an entertainment regulation hub created in at least a couple of cities in Eastern India? Consider what this means. Today there are thousands of people. And I think Kolkata is probably still the only place in India which has a government art college. And there are graduates that come out of these art colleges every year without fail. And they draw model paintings that art is about to evaporate. How many of the modern generation really has been connected to these graduates and to Vishwabharati? All that you need is a non-stop bus service from Kolkata airport to Shantiniketan. The routes are there. I mean, however much we criticize Mamata Banerjee, she has built the roads. Roads have come up in Bihar as well. Today it takes 80 minutes to travel from Kolkata airport to Burdwan on a good day. And there can be even better routes that can be built. There can be support that can come in. There would be investors willing to invest in this. This has never been taken to the constituencies. This has never been taken to interested people in interested areas where the constituency collection is possible. And what you have in the process is this region contributing productively to areas which it can do better than all other parts of the country, contribute intellectually and constructively. I mean, we just can't expect Bengalis, Orias and Biharis to work as hard as the Punjabis and Jats. Let's stop talking about that. Let them do what they are good at doing and they will get the money. But let them not think of the money as the main pursuit, because that will offend their sensitivities. So even if they are looking at, high thinking has some downside benefits and revenue will flow. So in areas like education and entertainment, I won't even go into tourism. I mean, tourism is such a, blatant gap to be filled up in spite of all the potential. But one last point. I think Professor Gupta will agree with me on this. For those of us who still have an interest in Indian agriculture, it's not fashionable to look at Indian agriculture anymore as economists. For those of us who still have an interest, there's a very interesting paradox. Today, Punjab is the largest paddy growing state in India. And why is it so? Study after study has shown productivity of paddy growth is much higher in Bihar and Bengal. Why does Punjab produce so much of paddy? Because of profitability. Decade after decade, Punjab government has given free electricity and input to farmers. Keep producing as much paddy as you want. It's profitable. And because of that profit, they don't even want to shift, despite knowing fully well that the water level is dropping alarmingly every year. Now, I am not suggesting that Eastern Indian states shift to a subsidy model. But all that I am suggesting is that productivity can be enhanced and profitability can be increased. And why can't the Eastern Indian governments lobby with the central government to open at least 2 more godowns of the Food Corporation of India in the region? Today you have 4 godowns of the Food Corporation of India. None of them are in East India. So for a grower from region, he or she has to travel all the way to these godowns, which are at an average distance of 1,000 kilometers from the paddy fields. And by the time he or she crosses 200 kilometers, the middlemen take the produce. And he or she in his life never comes to hear of this minimum support price. I mean, isn't this lethargy on part of the political elite of East India? What was stopping them from getting a couple of FCI godowns here? I mean, I really just don't see why this cannot happen. So I think let's come back to where we started from. It's between cynicism and objectivity. I think that's where the truth lies. Eastern India hasn't been given its fair share of attention, but there's no point in crying over it. The dew must be snatched. If necessarily the dew has to be snatched aggressively, I won't get into nostalgic memories of Naxalism, but I think East India can snatch what it is fairly deserving, and for that, if necessary, it has to agitate. It has to agitate, it has to send a message. I mean, today it's just not good enough that you have the Prime Minister of the country and in his state a community which not even commands 1% of the population. The Patels get away demanding reservations. The Jats get away demanding reservations. And Bengal won't demand reservations because Bengal, Odisha and Bihar are not really too worried about caste. They've moved ahead of that, they've learned to live with it. All that it demands is a due for its institutions and policies and better infrastructure. So what's wrong in demanding that? I mean, okay, fair enough. I mean, if you have a national policy of not associating with the Chinese, right? Let that be honored. But there's no reason why Chinese investment cannot come into upgrading Kolkata port if Chinese companies are sponsoring the Indian Premier League in cricket. And the biggest statue of Sardar Patel in Gujarat is being built by China. So why can't Patel invest in the Kolkata port? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Palit. I think it was an excellent presentation. I'm tempting to comment on each and every aspect of your presentation, which I would not like to do because of constraint of time, but one or two things I would like to mention. When you were talking about Eastern India and why the elite of Eastern India is lazy to present their views, I think one of the point that you need to know that by 1921, the political center of gravity shifted from east to west with the emergence of Gandhi. And freight equalization was not something which was a techno-managerial decision. It was very much a political economic decision. Because when Vivek, I think Krishnamachari, he was himself an industrialist. He became industries minister in Tamil Nadu. Later on, he became industries minister in Government of India. And it is he who introduced freight equalization to the detriment of development of Eastern India. So that is one of the most important things, which was this policy was not reversed in a significant manner. Technically, freight equalization is no more operational, but the disadvantage accruing from it has not been reversed even now. I would like to mention here that the editor of Economic and Political Weekly, it was earlier called Economic Weekly, Sachin Chaudhary's time. He travelled in third class from Bombay to Calcutta 32 times to convince Vidhan Roy that he should protest about the freight equalization. So he could meet him only once, and he turned deaf ear to this freight equalization problem. Now this fact was related by Professor Ashok Mitra. He wrote an article in one of the Bengali daily where he opposed designating Vidhan Chandra Rai's birthday as an industrial day in Bengal by then Lieutenant Governor. And in that he mentioned about this incident that Sachin Chaudhary travelled to Bengal, to Calcutta 32 times in third class, and he could meet the Chief Minister only once. So you see, one of the problem that Eastern India faced, though there was a elite in Bengal, and it also had a subnational trigger. In Orissa, there was an elite as well as subnational trigger. Bihar never had a subnational trigger. So I differ with you when you said that casteism is not there in Bihar. In Bihar, there is only two identities. Either a caste identity or a national identity. There is no subnational identity. But the problem in Bengal as well as in Orissa, that though apparently casteism is not there, apparently it is a construction of Bhadralok elites. It is very limited to Buddha, Brahmin, caste group in Bengal. Same is the case in Orissa. But unlike South India, where anti-Brahmin movement had democratized the social elite, that did not take place in the Eastern India. So I think that is one of the very important points. I just thought that I would mention about it because we know about these problems in much greater detail. I would like to mention one or two things. I don't know that by 1991, our share in manufacturing decreased. I think because of the opening of the economy, there are two components. One is liberalization. other is opening of the economy. Now, most of the states which leapfrog, like Japan or South Korea or many other East Asian countries, they had developed on the basis of very much protected industry, because protection initially helped in creating the industrial base. When we were on the threshold to take advantage of the industrial base, I think liberalization started. That, I think, there was a great setback where our own domestic, the foundation of the domestic industry floundered on the basis of that. So that needs to be taken into consideration. I agree with you that Eastern India has the advantage as well as what is called soft power is concerned. Soft power is the most important power. But you have to take into consideration that in the realm of soft power, authentically, South, Western India, even North India is leapfrogging. The amount of poetry, amount of novels, even Punjab is producing, that is very much phenomenal. So the advantage that we had, now if you see just, I give you one indicator, this, what is that award called, Sahitya Award? No, the Jnanpith Award. Now, if you take Jnanpith Award, which state has got maximum Jnanpith Award in post-independent India? It is Karnataka. Bihar has not yet got a single Jnanpith Award. Now, when Rabindranath Tagore got Nobel Prize, Kannadis was not a separate language. But in the post-independence period, Kannadis, I think they got 14 Jnanpith Award, which is absolutely phenomenal. So even in the realm of academic production, of course Bengal has got many, even Orissa has got many, but not Bihar. So whatever cultural advantage that we had, other states are much ahead now. It's a different matter. The electricity was introduced in Bangalore way back in 1906. Tata created the biggest industrial giant in Jamshedpur, the Tata Steel plant. I think that is the first of its kind in the entire colonial countries by an indigenous entrepreneur. But in contrast, Tata established Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. Now, why? If you in the Indian Institute of Science, that is not only they are producing knowledge, that also becomes a benchmark. In Karnataka, your main intention is to not to become an IAS officer. Your intention to is become a what is called scientist, engineer, and other things. But in Bihar, he didn't. Jamshedji Tata didn't establish this institution. They had done it in Eastern India. In fact, other than some of the indigenous institution which was created during the pre-independence period, no institution was created in the post-independent India. Only, I think, when Arjun Singh was there, he created Indian Institute of Science, something like that in Calcutta.
So IIT came up in Kharagpur.
IIT was a different ballgame. That
IIT
because
came up in Jhota.
yeah. Indian Institute of Science and all these things were created for a different purpose, because in the post-independence period, there was a problem of forward and backward linkages of education. Nehru emphasized on forward linkages of education primarily with the intention, because he wanted to build self-sufficient Indian economy. So he needed engineers, he needed doctors, he needed management graduates. He didn't give emphasis on backward linkages of education. that created a problem in the sense that we couldn't build an authentic base for knowledge society. Though I completely agree with you that in Eastern India, the authentic base of knowledge society is very much there. Because in a place like Bihar, Mitra will agree with me, that there is a lore on mathematical lores, pahara to bolte. Even in Bengali, we have pahara pahara tables. Arithmetical tables are spoken in a rhyme. So there is in Bihar, for example, there is a mass movement as far as arithmetic is concerned, language is concerned. So it can become a base for future academic base. Now there are many things I would like to comment. I'm sorry for taking time. I was so excited to hear you and
I deliberately wanted to be provocative.
When somebody talking on a East India fundamentalist manner, I was very happy to hear. Thank you so much. I'm handing over to Professor Mitra to take over.
No, I don't think it was planned like that. You are still chairing. I think Dr. Gupta is still chairing the question and answer session. I could only ask a question or two.
Sorry.
Okay. All right, friends. Our real work starts now. I mean, we have decided to sign an MOU, we have signed it. Each institute has shown what it is capable of. Now the test. Are we also capable of working together to produce new knowledge and new questions? That's why the question and answer session is such a crucial opportunity. The intention behind ISAS workshops or ISAS panel discussions is this: to give in a small group the context of a conversation where the preliminaries have already been spelled out, an opportunity to think together. I need say no more. The way Dr. Gupta responded to Dr. Palit shows me that my work is done, that I've got you going. Now my job is to stop you from going on. And I'll give an example by not going on and asking, instead of a dozen questions, only 2 questions. Please remember, each of the papers presented here is a substantive paper and needs a substantive discussion, because in a different form they will resurface as published papers, and that is required. In Singapore we call it KPI. That's key performance indicators. I don't know if you have that in Bihar too, but it's a nice thing to learn from Singapore. I'll tell you more about it later. Now my 2 questions. First one is to Neeraj, because his title reminded me, and actually is taken from the film, of one of my favorite Chinese films. What do you call it? The original title that Crouching Tiger, let me see, Crouching Tiger, Flying Dragon. Only I didn't see the divine Gong Li in your presentation, nor do I see the pyrotechnics of Kung Fu. In terms of political terms, what you did tell us is India the Crouching Tiger, China the Flying Dragon? Is that what is slowing the initiative down? And how does it connect to the presentation of Dr. Gupta? I presume the questions will be asked and then the chair will decide when they should be answered. Sometimes some chairs like to take 3 or 4 questions and pull them together. So we need to see the connectivity between what is slowing India down, or is it a deliberate strategy? It's called pull back a little to jump further. At least that is what we learned from Christine Lagarde of the IMF yesterday, where she said India is slowing down a little now, but in the medium term and the long term, India is a much better bet. And so there are two different ways of reading it. I'll leave it there. And my second question will be to Sochin. Sochin, what I noticed in your paper is a great paradox, and I don't think I've ever read it talked about in that term. Why do we find in Odisha the paradoxical coexistence of poverty reduction and violent collective protest action? Now, violent action comes from, we go back to Ted Robert Kerr, Why Men Rebel, and to the whole idea of one's legitimate expectations not being fulfilled. Kerr called it relative deprivation. So if poverty reduction reduces relative deprivation, why is there still protest action? Or is it an ecological fallacy? In statistics, now that's Amitendu's department, not mine, it would be called ecological correlations. Because the correlation is being imputed at the level of a macro unit, whereas rebelliousness and poverty reduction happen at micro levels. So is it a misaggregation of micros leading to a macro paradox? I mean, that's the statistical issue. I have not worked on it. All I have done is to publish a paper indirectly approaching this problem, and that I expressed in sub-national terms, going back to Dr. Gupta's category. Why would Koshala movement not lead to a Koshala state? I mean, around Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, they have all been subdivided. Bengal has not yet been subdivided, but Gorkhaland still goes on. So around Odisha it's happening, but in Odisha it's not happening. Even if there is a Koshala movement, I predicted it will not become a Koshala state. So what is peculiar about Odisha in terms of being unlike its neighbors? So those are the issues I want to take up with you, because I think that paper certainly has the potential to be reworked into a much deeper comparative paper. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. So I think any more question? Yeah, please.
My question is to Amitendu. One of the point you mentioned about development of coastal infrastructure. My question is more generic in a sense I want to know, how do you see different governments in center and state affecting these developmental plans, as where there is a same party government or similar alliance, there is more plans at least pronounced, which is not the case in eastern part. So is that the reason, or there are other reasons in that? Thank you.
Before Dr. Palit answers that, I would like to mention just one point. Till 1967, there has been an identical government, center and state, yet freight equalization was introduced. So it's not necessarily the same political formation helps. It is also the question of class that operates. I just wanted to put this point. So, Neeraj, would you like to answer first, or?
As Professor Mitra, you asked what is the linkage between my title and detailed analysis of that. In fact, your first proposition is exactly what I meant there. Why I have written Crouching Tiger? Because the tiger, which we know what it signifies, the country, India. And they have been relegating back and keeping moving back and forth on their policies. But they have never been able to come to a certain concrete conclusion so far as the relationship with China is concerned. Because the Chinese have been trying to extend hands of friendship But on the other side, on the contrary, they have also been kind of sending out certain signals that say that no, we don't want, we can be partners, but we can't be friends. So this relationship angle, the Sino-India relationship angle, this is certainly not is likely to affect almost all the things between the two countries and wherever these two countries are involved. So that is also the region that why I have mentioned China is a flying dragon now. They are not hidden anymore because they have been trying to move on into all corners of the world with their policies, with their programs, whether they are economic programs or political programs or a bid to win regional supremacy or something like that. But they have at least been moving on. They have been trying to show importance of China at least in the regional sphere and the global sphere as well. But India is very much reluctant so far as the relationship with China is concerned. Though India is also willing to, who am I to say they're willing to, but India is also trying to kind of counter China by entering into different kinds of bilateral partnership or trilateral partnership with other countries, but not with China per se. So this is the relationship between the two countries that signifies this particular title.
I would like to, one point I would like to add, I don't know how much relevant it will be, that nowadays, unlike earlier situation, when bigger countries wanted to grab territories, that has not abated yet, but they are more concerned about the market. Now, the esteem of a country is based on what is the total quantum of market. If America is big, not because of anything else, because America is $14 trillion market. China is about $8 trillion market. India is $1.5 trillion market. So while China is interested about territorial expansion, but they are equally concerned about BCIM because that will increase their market. Because market is increasingly becoming the key thing in the future. I think.
But I just the way you have explained the last thing, that China's expansionist policies, whether it is geopolitical expansion or trade expansion, with the purpose of doing trade in the region and finding a kind of market there in this greater region. But this also, scholars have tried to identify that these are simply the American way of explaining things, because since America is very much rival to China in most of the things, most of the economic terms and most of the geopolitical terms, they also want to see that China should not come and emerge as a leader, true leader of this region. So that might be just a limiting explanation, but I don't think that China is ever going to attack the country, and China is ever going to grab land in Arunachal Pradesh or anywhere else. But anyway, I welcome that you have said.
No, I'm not saying China is going to attack. Why I am saying the earlier territorial ambition was a key element. When Bismarck said that we want, what is that famous statement? We want something under the sun. He had mentioned. What he meant actually, he wanted some territory. That insatiable urge may have declined. But the key element is that they would like to have say in the market. Now, BCIM is one of the strategy of expansion of the market. From that point of view, I mentioned. Please.
Responding to Mitra's comment. Today, because of the time constraints, I couldn't really further explain my field work in Orissa. In fact, I observed and I acknowledged the revelationist reaction from society toward the state-led industrialization in Orissa. And as the revelationist reaction from society as a motivation that made the government of Orissa to reproduce or enhance the inclusionary schemes, at least in terms of industrialization. But I don't really see the linkage between inclusionary the policy invigoration and the poverty reduction. That's what we, I think, want to see further. But I saw it. So for example, in 2006, I don't know whether you remember, there was a huge movement, social movement in Kalinganagar against the Tata's steel factory building project. So in fact, that has been at the peak. I mean, it was going to the peak in 2006. It was started from 2005 after MOU was between Tata and the government of Orissa. And in 2006, there, I mean, dozens of tribal people, they were killed by police shooting. And then there was huge movement, a big movement, a small movement, and took place all over Orissa. So what government was realizing, I mean, after that movement, government rebuilt the Orissa rehabilitation and resettlement policy, and also they come up. I mean, government came up with the Orissa's public-private partnership policy. But still, we don't know yet how that is linked with the poverty reduction that I can see further, and I would like to also study.
He also mentioned about this Kaushalya state.
I think
What?
he is the author of the Kaushalya.
Why it didn't? Why it couldn't go into a subnational?
Full-fledged like Telangana. This is how Telangana started. That they had an issue with the coastal districts, and they mobilized it, and eventually led to Telangana state. And it should be similar. The hill districts. I mean, Abinash should probably tell us more about it. They are the ones that travel. Their resources are exploited by other people. There is a tremendous sense of exploitation. State motherly attitude towards the Kaushala language. Odisha speaks Odia, and coastal Odia is completely different. All of it is true, but that movement is not going anywhere. So this non-happening questions a trend that has been set by other Indian states, that subnationalism starts with a few fanatics and leads to the creation of a new state. That has been the sort of regular occurrence. Now Odisha beats that too. Odisha beats many other states in many other ways. There isn't a statewide movement of castes. The Congress party was never dominant, and Odisha has never been properly integrated. The Garjats. I mean, talk of Odia, if you go from Cuttack to Sambalpur, there will be 5 different ways of saying just why. Kia, Kia, and then it sort of keeps varying. And so underneath the idea of Odisha, there is a very, very fragmented structure. And that was the main argument I thought that would explain. But it still doesn't explain this paradox of spectacular poverty reduction, but continuation of spectacular protest movements. And that's why I'm thinking that there is probably an ecological fallacy, which we need to investigate a little more.
I would like to mention in this connection small article by Paul Brass, why Maithili movement could not develop into a full-fledged state.
We must follow that. We must follow that.
Paul Brass, it's a very interesting article. I don't remember where it had appeared in one of his edited books. Now, one of the factors that he mentioned, apart from many, that usually subnational identities are multicast. But Maithili movement was essentially based on Karn caste and the Maithili Brahmins. So that was the reason why it could not develop into a full-fledged subnational movement. Possibly Kaushalya movement, you can find out why it was like that. What was the social base of the movement. As far as Telangana movement is concerned, now if you see historically, when the Andhra Pradesh was formed, that was essentially the elite fought against the Tamil Brahmins, and that was the main basis for creation of the Andhra state. and there was a movement from many point of view, and communists played also a very important role. But that was, in some sense, it was a very authentic movement. And what is his name? Pallav Dhanu, I'm just forgetting the name, who died, who was the main leader of the Andhra movement. Putti Sriramulu, who died, and after 21 days, 21 fasting. So that triggered the Andhra movement that led to commission of the reorganization of the states. Now, in that sense, Telangana movement was not an authentic movement. Telangana movement was an authentic movement which was a peasant movement in 50s. But the Telangana movement had no justification that on the basis of economic deprivation, you create a state. Then Marathawad can also get created. So it was more a Government of India centric strategy to create a center so that Congress gets benefited in the subsequent parliamentary election, but it backfired actually. So in that sense, the trigger for the Telangana movement was not that intense. So I just wanted to mention this point in the context of Kaushalya state and others. Thank you. Dr. Palit.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. I'll address this question of Rajiv, but before that, just a few reactions to the comments that you made. You know, the first point that I try to make is that you mentioned about East Asia and Southeast Asia benefiting from protectionism. We are familiar with the infant industry argument that we give in literature and the fact that they need to be handheld. And yes, countries have definitely handheld. China continues to handhold its enterprises even today. But I think in India, I think the problem that arose was that there wasn't any sequencing of liberalization. It was a knee-jerk reaction to the external crisis, which was taken as an opportunity by the political elite to free up the economy. Otherwise, what could have happened is that technically protection could have been brought down systematically, enabling greater integration into the world economy, and also the fact that for 30 to 35 years there was a complete lack of recognition of the fact that there is a part of the world where there is a very important industrial revolution taking place, but India is not a part of it. Like, I have worked in the small industries department and I know the large number of items that were reserved just for small scale sector. And then I later saw when these reservations were lifted, the interesting part was none of these units could develop the capacity to deliver large orders in quick time. So there was a scale issue. And this is where the Chinese and many other East Asian enterprises actually picked up the advantage and they moved on. And we thought that this would get corrected after the multi-fiber agreement would go in the WTO. It did. So we suffered from that capacity. On soft power and cultural advantage, the distinction that I'm trying to make is that I agree with you. I mean, when it comes to the southern part of India, there's been a great variety of talent in various respects that is coming. But when I look at something like higher education at the end of the day is a concurrent subject in the Indian Constitution. And there's no reason why states cannot play a more active role in higher education institution. And let's say, for example, in Bihar or in Bengal, why can't private universities come up? I don't see that happening. And it's so sad because the degree of academic, administrative experience as well as scholarship is so high in the states, which can be utilized. I mean, across the world and even in India, we see that vice chancellor positions, 30 to 40% are being occupied by people from East India. But they are most unwilling and reluctant to go back to East India. So, which is actually in a sense a paradox. I think that's the thought that I thought I would share with you in this context. Rajiv, on your question of different governments in center and state affecting port development. Port development, the strategy is basically, I don't know, Rajiv has disappeared somewhere. So, just to allude to what Rajiv was mentioning, port development in India, I think, has been again a part of a joint responsibility of the center and states. The major ports are developed by the port trusts, which are controlled by the government of India. But there is no stopping the minor ports. The minor ports can always be developed by states and private initiative. I think the irony that I see over here is that India participates in port development in Sri Lanka. But it's unwilling to allow another foreign government to come into port development in its own territory. Now the question is, if it had not been China, but some other government enterprise which would have expressed an interest in developing ports, would that have been allowed to carry out or not? Because I think the concern that is coming out is that even if today a state government in India gets an expression of interest from a foreign investor in port development, minor port development, that proposal might be struck down from the central level because of the nationality of that investor. I think this is a concern which needs to be taken up. And to be very honest, I think sitting in Delhi and visualizing port development is a tough call. You just don't get to see water around you anywhere. So that has always been an issue with me.
Just one or 2 points I would like to mention. That why private universities could not develop in Bihar. I'm not sure about Bengal. I think Odisha is better in this respect. In Bihar, I remember that in early 70s, number of medical colleges came up on the basis of capitation fee. But those universities, those institutions turned out to be completely free. They took money and they didn't promote anything, and ultimately government had to take over those medical colleges. Now one of the problems, if you see nationally, there are 2 types of corruptions. Globally, we see 2 types of corruption. One Philippines model, other is Indonesian model. In Indian context, there are 2 models. One Bihar model, other is Gujarat model. Now in Bihar, it is an input-based corruption. If you take out the input, even in the medical colleges, the people who took money, they didn't put up a medical college. But in Gujarat, it is a turnover-based corruption. It is a win-win situation for everybody. They produce, they share profit. The best example is the Manipal institution in Karnataka. Now, initially they started Manipal Institute in 1950s because the dowry for a doctor was highest. So they created medical institution. But whenever they created a medical institution, they reinvested. In the process, they created a higher education empire. Now, Nadella is not a product of IIT. He is a product of Manipal Technical Institution. Many people possibly may not know about it. So, the production of Nadella from a Manipal Technical Institution is some sort of a benchmark which was created by the Karnataka private institutions. This never happened in our part of the country. I don't know about Bengal. I'm told that many private institutions are coming. Now, they think it in terms of only profitability. They don't reinvest. So if you reinvest, then it's a different ballgame altogether. Other part I would like to mention about Odisha, about Gujarat, that I was associated with one of the companies there, the Sanghi group of industries. They were building Asia's largest cement factory in Run of Kutch. They bought mines and mines of land, practically free. Yet they encroached a Chinkara sanctuary. Now, at that time, there was no clear-cut government in Gujarat. So what they did to justify the encroachment by 2/3 majority, they legitimized the intrusion by passing it from the assembly, and they changed the definition of a sanctuary. So this is the way they help the institutions there. And I asked them whether there was any pay. They said no. They will share anything when we start doing profits. So I just wanted to mention that Gujarat example, that how they went out of the way to help the industries and other institutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, speakers. I'd like now to invite Professor Subrata to present tokens of appreciation to our guest speakers. Professor Mitra, please. First to Dr. Shabai Gupta.
This is part of our strategy not to allow our guests to leave empty-handed. And we only give home-cooked food, home-cooked knowledge.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Niraj Kumar.
Thank you, Alex.
And finally, Dr. Abinash Mohanty.
Abinash, proud son of Odisha and more proud son of Bihar now. Well done. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now invite Professor Mitra to deliver the closing remarks. Professor Mitra, please.
Friends, as we reach the end of this very engaging afternoon, it's an opportunity for me and a privilege to say a few words to wrap up what we have achieved together and make a list of things we should be achieving in the future. That's one of the remarkable things about Singapore, how much gets done in what little time. But like the gentle paces of the ballerina who sort of floats along, or in your case who flies along, you should look underwater to see how much hard work got her there. Among the things I have noticed today, first and foremost, we talked about as regards the political economy of development. What is development? How to measure it? What has politics got to do with economic development? And what should be the unit of measurement of development? Should you go where development is taking place, like Deng Xiaoping's coastal areas, or must development come to your doorstep? Or in other words, must local and regional development be an integral part of national development, even if it brings down the rate of growth? I mean, that's the range of theoretical options and consequent policy and institutional solutions. Then we talked about substantive issues, each institute coming up with substantive issues of water or state development or elite structure, state society connectivity, in our case, and environment, very, very important in your case, or for that matter, the whole idea of corridors, they're in the air, but the important thing is to understand in political analysis one forgets. It's just as important to explain what happened as what did not happen. Or if you go back to Sherlock Holmes, why did the dog not bark? Well, that could be another title for EOP. We talked about the substantive issues, but in a substantive way, where I could already see what we might be doing in the future to talk about these issues. As I was listening to Dr. Palit explaining port development, it occurred to me that maybe since we are Eastern India focused, we could look at two ports and ask, why didn't they get anywhere? And one of them could be Paradip Port. As Abinash should know, it has everything. Deepwater Port started way before other people, well connected with Daitari mines with a super fast expressway, and then nothing. So why did so much lead to Solitro? Maybe another job for Sojin as you graduate from one Orissa problem to another Orissa problem. We then also talked a little about not just Eastern India, but unpacking Eastern India, not lumping it together, but deconstructing it to show its inner dynamics and good points, as well as not so good points. I'm very, very grateful to Dr. Palit, who is not a well-known cultural anthropologist, but today he was one, not to overload culture, to say Odisha is synonymous with Pakala. You know what is Pakala? Eat a little and sleep a little, think a little. So it's not culture of laziness or culture of underachievement, but deep politics, structural issues that explain. Or, well, as you explained to me much earlier, that underneath it all, there's a core which unites us. That there's the same need for achievement, same capacity, same spark in each of us, but still China and India are different. Eastern India is different from Southern India. Our job as social scientists is to deconstruct those differences and think in terms of the commonality that would help us understand where there are differences. And the policy analysis should then lead to the next mile, what to do about it. These were the very, very important issues that emerged today, and what gave me, it all made me very happy, because getting this MOU together and launching it and generating resources that would sustain it beyond my mandate was one of my big dreams, and that has actually happened today. And I'll now leave it to the young folks, and it so happened that Neeraj is friends with Amit and our Rajiv. Underneath there are this connectivity that he will work hard, think hard, and publish widely. That just like Singapore refinery, there isn't a lot of petrol under the soil of Singapore, but stuff goes out of here. You get stuff to come. That's what makes Singapore a hub, a useful hub. We'll use it. That's the kind of happiness I have as director. But beyond the director is the man, and probably I'm the only one around here who unites different parts of Eastern India. I'm a Bengali from Odisha, and up to my father's time, Odisha and Bihar were the same state. And in a manner of speaking, I feel them all. I've done research on them. And today, to see you all getting together here and getting together very nicely makes my day. For that, I have first and foremost our friends from Bihar to thank for Dr. Mitra. You've done wonderfully to bring yourself. You travel not very happily, I know, but you've made an effort to come, and you have brought all these nice people. We are very, very grateful to you. I'm also very grateful to the home team, to Jordan. I will always remember, long after the ISAS phase is over, your smiling face and the note going up. Prof, it's time to stop. For 22 years in Hyderabad, I was normally given 90 minutes, sometimes I took 120. Here 5 minutes are 5 minutes. And I'm very grateful to you. And there will be no event without an audience. So I'm very grateful to the audience. Thank you all.
I must also thank all the members of ISAS for participating and making our stay very comfortable.
Take a group photo maybe or can you all